Let's talk about guides and aligning things with the Move tool, because when you work with text, occasionally you need to place it very carefully or align it even though it's not within the same paragraph. All right, so guides are partially controlled by the ruler and partially controlled under the View menu. Notice that if we go to View, we have extras showing. That's what Control Hide does. It just toggles extras on and off. And we have the ability to do things like show grids, which are actually quite useful when you're trying to place text. But we're going to be showing, View, show, not grids, but instead guides. So how do we get those guides? Notice that we have things like lock guide and new guide layout. So we could make a new guide and position it somewhere like 3 inches down. Again, this is a 12.5 by 12.5 inch square at 150 pixels, so it'll bounce over, but now we can move it around, and when we move it, we see that it says how many inches it's moving over. But what if we need something else? That's kind of tedious. One thing you can do is bring up your ruler, and you can do that under your view control, show rulers here, view rulers, there we have it, or Control R to bring the rulers up. Once you have the rulers, you can drag from a ruler in order to create a guide. And you can do it from either the vertical or the horizontal. Now that said, right-clicking on the ruler controls what you're going to see. So we could do centimeters, we could do pixels, which I do fairly rarely unless I'm working very small or very precise. You can also work in picas and points, both of which are used with fonts. Points are what we've been using recently, or percent, which is frequently very useful if you know you're going to be scaling something up and down and just need to know the percentage. I'm just going to set it back to inches. Now, that said, we've got these guides. If we add in some text, might help if this were maybe visible. I'm going to set it to white. And we have some text. Once we have this text object, will behave like other objects. I can move this around and you'll see the smart guides triggering. Now these smart guides do some great stuff. It shows you where the spacing is. It shows you where the left vertical or the bottom horizontal are. And if you have snap on, it will snap to it. Now right now we have snap off. I believe I turned it off at the beginning of this video set. That was a couple of hours ago though, so I don't quite recall if it was in this video set. But if you go to View, you can turn Snap on, and it will start snapping to the guide. See how it gets sticky? This is great. This is a great way to position text as you're going. Now, you don't have to necessarily snap to the text, but you can. You could snap to the grid if you prefer. You could snap to other layers, the document bounds, the guides. You can control where those go. Now, notice under the view, you also have the ability to lock guides, so you don't accidentally move them around, which can be useful. You have the ability to clear guides, which is also useful if you have too many guides. But notice unless you've saved your guides prior to clearing them, they're gone. So I'm going to just undo a step, Control Z, to bring them back. If you want to temporarily hide the guides, Control H will hide it. Control H will also bring it back. And what do I mean by save guides? Well, you can also do this. You can do a new guide layout. And the new guide layout, which I essentially never use because I rarely need to do this complicated a grid on Photoshop. If I'm getting to this point, I usually need to be in something like Illustrator or InDesign. This has the ability to do presets such as 12 columns, 8 columns, all that good stuff. Rule of thirds is quite useful. And this is just a number of rows and columns. You can also clear out any existing guides like the ones that I just put in. And you can start doing things like changing the number of columns, like 4 columns and maybe 7 rows. Now you can change the count of that. You can do the width. So, oops, I made it mad. I've gone far too far. The column layout is too large. I believe this is in inches. So there we go. So you can see that the width is quite tiny. You can center the columns. So instead of starting on the left and moving over, it will start in the middle and start spreading out. So we could do 8, for example, or 100, and we could have 100 little guides popping up all over the place. Do the same with rows. Could have 12 rows if we so desired, and that would bring it down. We don't have to center. You can see that it's bringing it across. You can remove the width, in which case it will try to evenly spread these out. You also have gutter. Let's do 0.5 inches. And now we have too many of these. Let's do 5 of these so you can actually see what's going on. So 5 of them. 1, 2, 3, 4. And then we have the 5th on either side. Am I counting columns? I am counting columns. Let's do 3. I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong part. 3. We have 1, 2, 3, with the gutter being this small space between these two. So essentially it's creating columns, but these columns are made out of additional parts. We could do 5 of them, for example. And now 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Notice there's no margin on either side because there's a margin control here. And you can set up as much margin as you want. Now, this is useful if you wanted to, say, have a preset margin of 1/4 inch all the way around so that it would equal a 1/2 inch on either side, or sorry, total, because if we do 0.25, I seem to have hit several thousand instead of 0.25. Let me try that again. 25, there we go. And I don't want to type that in a bunch of times, so I'm going to copy, tab, Control V to paste, tab, Control V to paste, tab, Control V to paste. Now what this does is that it gives us a border of 1/4 inch on either side, so it's a 1/2 inch, which means on the inside we have 12 inches, since I said this was 12.5 inches total. All right, so that said, we could save this by going to Save Preset, and then we could save this wherever we wanted. By default, it will go to, on a PC, App Data, Roaming, Adobe, Photoshop, whatever version you're on. In this case, you can see I'm in CC 2019. Presets, Guides. You can also save it wherever you want. It's a guide layout, otherwise known as a .gds file. I don't need to save this in this case, but you can add them in that way. You can also select any of these defaults. All right, so that's another way to create guides. This can be useful if you're trying to set up text, or more importantly, if you're trying to set up text boxes. You can now control with Snap very easily where each box of text ends up and where the text inside of it goes, which means you can do some pretty cool stuff pretty quickly. Spacebar to move these around while you're working. And there you have it. Now we can go back to this is some text, and we've got some text. Now, all that said, we can clear out our guides and just do a clear guides. There we go. And we've got all of our text lined up. Now that we don't have these guides, notice that these snaps are still working pretty well. If we hold down Control while using the Move tool, you can move on the inside and it will tell you how big this text is, how much space this is taking up. And if you move on the outside, it will tell you how far it is away from each edge. Now, this size is controlled by the ruler, so if I switched it to pixels, I could find out how many pixels away it is. If I set it to points, I can find out how many points it is away from the edge. How many points is this? All of that good data is readily available and good to go. I'm going to switch it back to inches. Now there's something else. While we're snapping two other things, what if you kind of have some stuff around and you want to rearrange these? Now we have 4 layers, correct? Well, we have some arrangement controls up at the top of the Move tool. Notice that right now they're all grayed out. Now, the reason for that is that we only have one layer selected. If we hold down Shift and select multiple layers, or if you prefer Control and then click them in whatever order you want to select them, you can start doing things like distribution. So if we move over, we could do a distribute horizontally, and you can see that it tried, but because it's text and they're different shapes, it's doing some weird stuff. So we could try instead to align and distribute, and we could do it to our spacing, horizontal or vertical. As we cover it up, it's going to smush it on top of each other, which isn't really what we want. We can instead, and this is a little more useful, if I mouse over, this should be, I would like to get the exact correct text so that I don't tell you wrong. Distribute left edges, We could distribute horizontal centers. We could distribute right edges. We could align bottom edges, which can be more useful here. If we move that up, we have also distribute top edges, I believe it is, top edges. We can distribute vertical centers. We can distribute bottom edges. We can distribute, we can try to space things vertically. Now this will only work if you're somewhat close for the vertical and horizontal. So let me demonstrate this a little bit more clearly. Right now it just seems like it's jumbling things, right? Let's control click. Oops. Control click on the label and not on the T icon, which will make a selection instead. Okay, so now let's align things to the left. Align things to the right. Align things center. Makes more sense. What if we include the background, which is locked in this? Control click, because I'm skipping these two middle pieces. Now align center. Oh, it's now exactly in the center of the canvas. Align right, touches the right. Notice there's a space in this one, so the space is touching on the right side, but not the text. That's not the case over here. Align center. Distribute center. Now here's an issue. When we distribute it to the center, these two pieces of text lined up right on top of each other. So we may want to comment, well, I can't move a selected locked background. I just select one piece. By holding down Shift, I will drop it down without moving it side to side. That space, though, is throwing things off. I have accidentally deleted an entire word. Let's try that again. It seems to just be the way it's going to be. And that's why. It's because it's falling off the edge. So we'll do that. There we go. And now we will distribute. Again, control click. And adding in the locked background will allow me to distribute to the center. Now that said, I can select this is some text again. And move that up or down and will remain centered. Okay, now that said, let's turn on these two pieces of text and grab one of them. Let's change the alignment on this one. So we've got them set up. We may want to shift click this time. They're together, so why not shift click? Let's align them at the top or in the center. Now, if we control click to grab the background, the center will behave differently. It will go straight in the middle, as will this center will now cover each other, but this can become an interesting, illegible design. So that might be fun depending on what you're doing. Oops. Again, I cannot move a locked background layer. And the reason this worked so well is that the background layer is in fact locked. Whoops. Which means that it doesn't move, only the text will move when I'm aligning it. Control click that other one. I'm going to align their tops. There we go. And so we can control the alignment of different pieces just using the move tool. Yeah, I think it's quite useful. Remember, distribute is spacing, align is just pushing these things up and against each other. And if you want to turn off snap again, just go to view and turn off snaps. There you have it. And then you can just slide things around wherever you want without worrying about it. If you, for some reason, don't want to show the smart guides, you can turn them off under view, show smart guides. I like them a lot, though. I tend to leave them on just so I can see what's going on, even if I'm not snapping. So there you have it. That's guides and alignment using guides and the move tool. Hopefully that was useful. And in the next video, we're just going to do a quick demonstration of a way that we could approach this project.